I'm Zaza, 30 years old, and I want to share a past that I kept hidden for many years because it was too painful and hard to accept. There are things in life that we never thought would happen to us, but they still come and change. Everything I never imagined, that I would have to live in torment because of a truth that I still find hard to accept. My story is not one of love or family happiness, as people often think, but rather about sacrifices and hidden emotions. People say that love is the only reason to. People get married, but in the case of my mother and stepfather, I knew that was not true from the first time he appeared. I felt something was off, and gradually I realized that my mother was just an excuse. I was the real reason he married her. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so I can continue bringing you more fascinating, true you stories like this one. And don't forget to watch this video till the end, because this story is going to be incredibly interesting. My mother owned a small, old-fashioned boutique. After my father passed away when I was young, she raised me and took care of me, until I became an adult with her resilience and determination. She not only took care of our lives, but also transformed her fashion store into a beloved place in our community. My mother has always been a model of strength and independence in my eyes. Life went on steadily and peacefully. My mother continued to work hard at the boutique, while I focused on my studies as time passed. I entered a transitional phase of my life when I started university. It was the first time I felt like I had truly escaped my mother's protective embrace and stepped into the wider world. The early days of university brought many new experiences, and then one day I met Mr. Stan, who was not only my teacher, but also my stepfather. Mr. Stan was a philosophy lecturer, and from the very first day of class, I was captivated by his teaching style. He helped me gain a deeper understanding of the subject and changed the way I viewed life after class. Conversations became more frequent, and through that I realized he had a significant influence on me. However, I gradually began to feel something strange in his gaze when he looked at me. First, I thought it was just my imagination, but as time went on, this feeling became clearer. There were moments when I spoke, and he looked at me, not just like a teacher to a student, but with a deeper gaze, as if there were things he was not saying. That gaze contained an intimacy, a silence filled with hidden meanings, and I began to feel uncomfortable every time it appeared. I felt confused. It was not the gaze I was used to, but one that seemed to be examining me, as if expecting something from me that I could not understand. I wondered if I was imagining too much, but this strangeness could not be denied. As time passed, not only Mr. Stan's eyes, but I also began to notice strange actions from him. Every time I talked or walked by, he would try to stand closer to me, sometimes placing his hand on my shoulder in a way that made me uneasy. Those gestures seemed harmless at first, but they became heavy, making me uncomfortable once he kept me after class to discuss the lecture. But the conversation was not like the previous ones. He didn't just talk about the subject, he seemed to want to prolong our meeting. That unnecessary gaze and intimacy made me feel suffocated. I no longer felt the respect and distance that should exist between teachers and students. Gradually, I didn't dare to see him as much as before. I made up excuses to avoid private conversations after school when he offered to help. I could only refuse, claiming I was busy, but in my heart, I just wanted to maintain my distance. I tried to sit further away. In class, limit eye contact, and sometimes Evan went to school late. To avoid seeing him before class, I thought that if I avoided Mr. Stan, everything would be fine. If I didn't have to face those strange looks and actions, maybe I could forget the anxiety that surged inside me. For the rest of the school year, I tried to avoid seeing him again. Everything seemed to return to normal when I kept my distance, and I thought all the trouble was over. However, I didn't expect that the safety I created for myself was only temporary. After a year of school, when I returned home, I noticed something different about my mother. She was more cheerful than usual. Her eyes sparkled whenever she spoke, and sometimes she would laugh quietly to herself as if hiding a special happiness. I began to wonder, but my mother just said she was very happy because life was getting better then. One afternoon, while both my mother and I sat in the living room, she suddenly sat down next to me, her face radiant and her eyes shining with unrestrained joy. She began to share something important. She had met someone special, someone she wanted to introduce to me, seeing the happiness evident in her every gesture. My heart also felt light. For so many years, my mother had raised me alone, sacrificing her own joys to devote all her energy to my care. I felt relieved that she had finally found the joy and happiness she deserved the day my mother prepared to introduce that man to me. I was very much looking forward to it. The house was neatly arranged, and the dining table was carefully set by my mother. I could see the excitement and joy in her eyes, and I hoped this man would bring her the comfort and happiness she had been searching for all this time. When the doorbell rang, my heart fluttered. Mom quickly went to open the door, while I stood waiting in the living room, imagining the man who had come into her life when the door opened, and I saw that the man who entered was Mr. Stan. My heart filled with indescribable shock. I stood still, unable to believe my eyes. All the uneasiness I had felt about him suddenly rushed back, enveloping me. The man my mother loved, the man she had introduced me to with such trust and happiness, was the man I had been trying to avoid all this time. A series of conflicting thoughts exploded in my head. Why him? When did they know each other? Did he have any intentions? The uneasiness in my heart rose sharply, and all the memories of his strange looks and unsettling gestures flooded back, making it impossible for me to think clearly. I looked at my mother, searching for a sign that she recognized the strangeness of the situation, but she was completely oblivious. She was still smiling, happily introducing Ethan as if everything was fine in my heart. This was simply a debut of a man she loved, unaware that Ethan's presence was stirring a storm in my heart. Mr. Ethan walked in, still smiling, calmly, looking friendly and polite. He greeted me and pretended to be surprised, saying that he didn't expect me to be my mother's daughter. I tried to act surprised too, but inside I was in turmoil. My mother, innocent and unaware of what was happening in my mind, laughed and was thrilled to discover that Ethan was my teacher. The two of them happily chatted, discussing this unexpected coincidence, while I just stood there feeling a sense of insecurity clinging to me. I couldn't stop asking myself as who Mr. then really was and why he appeared in my mother's life in a completely different role than I knew him to be. Was this really a coincidence, or was there something hidden that I couldn't see? From that day on, everything went on as usual. There were no strange signs from Ethan or anything that made me worry. Mom and he grew closer and closer, and their feelings felt very natural. I saw Mom happier than ever. She smiled often and looked radiant every day. Not long after, Mom decided to remarry, and Ethan officially became my stepfather. Everything went smoothly. Nothing unusual happened, and our family life continued to be peaceful and stable as time passed, and there were no strange signs. I began to feel that I was thinking too much. Perhaps my initial worries were just due to the stress of facing the changes in my mother's life and my own seeing Mom happier every day. I gradually let go of my doubts and insecurities, seeing my mother smiling brightly with Ethan. I realized that the most important thing was that she had found the happiness she deserved. Finally, I accepted their relationship and gave them my blessing from the bottom of my heart. I hoped that my mother would continue to live in that joy, and I also learned to accept Ethan as a part of our family as time passed. I did not see any unusual signs in Ethanus. I had worried. Gradually, I blamed myself for thinking too much and letting unfounded worries affect me. Seeing my mother increasingly happy with Ethan, I also felt relieved. Finally, I felt happy for my mother and sincerely wished her well, hoping her life would always be filled with joy and happiness. At that time, I thought that everything would just continue peacefully. It had been a long time without any unusual signs from Ethan, and I gradually felt reassured. He no longer worried or doubted Stepfather because he had always been a good person, caring for my mother and our family. It truly believed that my previous concerns were just my sensitivity and imagination. When I was 22, I graduated from university and started looking for my first job. Although I had not found a suitable job, I decided to help my mother at her boutique. We spent more time together, and Ethan often stopped by the store, helping with small tasks when he had free time. Everything was still going smoothly, and I no longer had any doubts about Ethan. I truly believed that he was a good husband to my mother, and had also become a part of my life. But then on the worst day of my life, everything changed. I was sick that day. The fever made my body tired, and I couldn't go to the store with my mother. As usual, she told me to stay home and rest, and I didn't think much of it. Only Ethan, my stepfather, was home with me that day because he didn't have to go out at first. I didn't worry or suspect anything. After all those years of living together, I believed he was a good, trustworthy person who loved my mother very much. I lay in my room trying to lull myself to sleep to forget the pain and fatigue caused by the fever. However, that peace didn't last long. The thing I never expected to happen happened that very day in the house that I once considered the safest place. Ethan came into the room with a glass of water and some pills. He said they were painkillers, help my fever go down faster. His voice was gentle and kind. Nothing that raised suspicion. The fever had made my head spin, and I didn't think much of it. I just wanted to get better and get some sleep. So I took the pills from him and swallowed them without hesitation. I drank the water, unaware that this was just the beginning of the worst that was about to unfold at that moment. Everything seemed normal, and I didn't notice anything odd after I finished drinking. I didn't feel anything unusual. The medicine didn't seem to take effect immediately, and I was still fully aware of my surroundings. I lay there quietly, thinking that the fever would soon subside. However, after about 20 minutes, things began to change. Ethan returned to the room, this time without medicine or water. There was something in his eyes that worried me, but when I tried to sit up, I was shocked to find that my body could no longer move. A feeling of paralysis spread throughout me, as if all my strength had been drained. I panicked inside, trying to brace myself to escape this helplessness, but I could only lie there, eyes wide open. As Ethan walked closer, Ethan approached, his face calm, but his eyes flashed with something that sent a chill down my spine. I struggled trying to move, but my body seemed completely paralyzed. Not a single finger would move. The helplessness frightened me. But that fear increased, even more when he leaned down, his face just a little away from mine, and smiled. His smile was no longer friendly and gentle, but scary and cold. Then he whispered, his voice soft, but clear enough for me to hear. I have waited for this opportunity for a long time. I was horrified, unable to believe what I had just heard. My mind was spinning, trying to comprehend what was happening, but everything seemed to fall apart. At that moment, the worries and doubts from before suddenly became too real, and I realized that the nightmare I had thought was just an imagination had become a reality. Ethan sat down next to him, his eyes filled with calculation. His smile sinister. I lay there, helpless, unable to move or resist, only able to listen to his every word. Each sentence echoed clearly, gradually revealing a horrifying truth that I had never considered. He began to explain that ever since I entered college, he had feelings for me and had always wanted to get close to me. He had tried every opportunity to approach me, but noticed that I always kept my distance and did not let him in his attempts to connect, failed, and my avoidance made him choose another path to infiltrate my life. Ethan began to learn about me, delving into my personal information and background. When he learned about my mother and our family situation, he decided that the only way to get close to me was through her. He planned to get to know my mother. Gradually earning her trust, everything seemed to happen easily for him, and before I knew it, He had become my mother's husband, integrating himself into my family life. Hearing those explanations made me feel as if I was falling into a deep pit of despair. I could not believe that everything that had happened around me was some meticulously orchestrated what I had thought was normal. My mother's happiness turned out to be just a facade with the ultimate goal of getting close to me. I felt immense pain and disgust when I realized that from start to finish everything was part of his plan. After he finished speaking, Ethan moved closer, his eyes filled with satisfaction as he saw me lying motionless on the bed. I was completely helpless as he approached his eyes. No longer held any of the gentleness my mother had seen. They were greedy and cold. I tried to shrink back, but I couldn't. Every movement seemed hopeless. My heart raced in my chest, but my body felt locked, no longer obeying my will. Then Ethan leaned down, his hands sliding over me, bringing with them a feeling of disgust that I couldn't shake. He took control of my body without mercy. I could only lie there, paralyzed, feeling every moment he took from me. The seconds stretched like eternity, and all I could do was hope for it to end. But no, he didn't stop. The world around me seemed to collapse. All the people I had known were torn away by him. I wanted to struggle to fight back, but it was all in vain. Ethan didn't stop, and my body no longer belonged to me. Time seemed to drag on forever, each passing second becoming a nightmare with no escape. I lay there helpless, staring at the ceiling, trying to escape reality. But everything kept happening slowly and painfully. The feeling of paralysis, of losing control, made the fear in me rise with each second, each minute. Every move he made, every touch, was like a blow to my self-esteem and dignity. Pieces of me shattered without any way to stop it. I felt my body no longer belonged to me. I was completely taken over by him. Everything happened so slowly. I could only lie there, living in terror with no way to fight back. Each moment lasted for hours, and I just wanted it all to end when it was over. I lay there feeling empty and numb. The room seemed cold, stifling, and lifeless. Ethan stood up, adjusting his clothes, as if nothing had happened, while I lay still, unable to escape the horror I had just experienced. I felt my entire world collapse. Everything I knew and believed and faded into meaninglessness. My mind was filled with echoing questions full of pain and anger. I could not understand why it had happened. How could the person my mother loved, the person I had tried to accept as part of my family, do this to me? The pain, fear, and betrayal all mixed together, suffocating me and leaving me with nothing but helplessness and despair. Ethan glanced at me one last time, his eyes cold and remorseless, then left the room, leaving me with all the hurt, the torment, and the growing obsession in my mind. I didn't know how to face this reality or how to continue living when everything seemed to have completely collapsed. After a while, as the effects of the drug gradually wore off, I felt controls slowly returning. To me, body still weak and dizzy. I tried to stand up. Every movement was painful, but I knew what I had to do next. My hands shook as I tried to straighten my clothes, attempting to hide the traces of the horror I had just experienced. I looked around the room, my eyes stopping at the phone on the table. It was my only way to call for help, to end this nightmare. With unsteady steps, I approached, my hands still trembling. As I picked up the phone, I dialed, with each number feeling more challenging. When the operator's voice came through, I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady and let it all out. The police arrived in seconds, but to me, the wait felt like an eternity. When they entered the house, the silence shattered. Voices rang out, footsteps hurried, and finally, Ethan was arrested. He didn't resist, just bowed his head silently as the police handcuffed him, as if he knew it was over. My mother returned shortly after the police arrested Ethan. She saw me still trembling and weak, standing next to the police.